Let's get into the bags.
Broke into his apartment
No elephants.
with a ninja get up on and everything, and tiptoed across the floor, and
With the cartoon sound effects.
that's right,
And
and
they tiptoe.
and sat on the episode.
Is
two.
this a bag of gold or is this a bag of shit?
Which bag is this? You decide. You tell us.
You tell us. You can email us at passthebagpodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Instagram. Hit us up in our WeChat group. Join our WeChat group.
Wait,
We'd
hold
love for
on.
you to
Let
do
me,
that.
let me say something. In the name of vulnerability, that kind of emotional vulnerability that we feel like is important here at Pass the Bag.
booger in my nose.
No, you have no boogers.
Okay.
It's just your nose.
That's
It's a good nose.
Good nose.
You know, even before I came here today,
Uh-huh.
I could feel it. You know, I could feel the energy. I could feel the yeah, absolutely. I felt some sort of way even before we came here to get into the show. And I had to scan my body and I had to say, what is going on with me this morning?
Mm.
I told myself I was going to have all of the healthiest practices, you know, on the way here. And I did a little bit of acting out. I didn't quite make it. So, you know, I feel like that part was important to say. And I don't know if you want to check in on that or not, or we can just go straight into the first bag.
I'm ready to get into the bag.
Let's get into it. Bag of Ish
Is
or
it a
bag of
gold or a bag of ish?
Let's go.
Did you know
Did I?
that white people get killed by the police too?
Holla at me. Let me know what it is.
So, I was reading this amazing article from, I think it's the Washington Post.
All right.
Great news outlet when it comes to getting quality factual information.
All right.
And they put out this amazing article about how white people can compartmentalize police brutality and black people have to deal with it. And so, and the link of the article will be in the comments below, so you can get it. And if you're in our WeChat group, I'll send it out. But they told a story. They started the article with a story about this guy named Daniel Shaver. And Daniel Shaver is like a human being labeled white. And he was killed by an officer like in a stop when he went to reach to pull up his pants. And the officer shot him. And it got caught on body cam. And the worst thing about it is the officer ended up, you know, getting suspended, but he got reinstated. Like, he's working again. And so, which brought me to the idea that, you know, cops may shoot and kill twice as many white people as black people. But when you think about proportions, there are about 6 many in the States. There are 6 times as many white people as black people in the States. So it brings me to the question, what does the percentage of white deaths say about law enforcement?
Well,
while we get into this whole conversation today about
first I want to say I remember seeing that video years ago. And even just thinking about that video turns my stomach. Because I saw the video and I saw the police officer running after the guy. As the guy was walking away, the cop had his gun drawn and was running after the guy. I saw the video. And the dude just literally just turned around and, you know, because he was wearing his pants low, went to pull up his pants and cop shot him dead. You know, to get back to the question, and the question is, what is the percentage of so-called white folks getting killed by law enforcement? What does that say, the percentage of deaths? What does it say about law enforcement? Well, it says that it doesn't say anything that we haven't already heard. I barely even want to say the words because I feel like they've been said so much, and I just want to lean on doing something different. But, you know, for fear of alienating the audience, I'll just go ahead and say, man, look, law enforcement needs to change. That's what I'm going to say. That's the writer side of me.
Right.
Say it in as few words as possible to make it as potent as possible. It needs to change in a way where these types of things happen a lot less and don't happen, period.
Yeah. I think the fact that it doesn't just happen to racial minorities based on the idea what race is created by, you know, scientists. The fact that it doesn't just happen to the 80s or the Latin community or the Native American community, but it also happens to white people just lets me know how systemic the problem is. Because if it didn't happen to white people and it only happened to brown people and people of the different hues, then I would say that the problem is may not be systemic, but it might just be racism.
Was that information new for you? Was that when you found that out?
No,
about
no, no,
the-
no. It wasn't new. The information wasn't new at all because, I mean, police. That's the thing. Like when officers have, a gun, they have a certain level of power that is irreversible if it goes bad. Like if an officer pulls his gun and shoots someone, because they have that power, then in certain instances it can lead to a negative outcome. And so in them having that power and wielding that power, it leads to situations where people lose their lives. And I mean, obviously, the stats include so when you include this, like these not just unarmed
What you really
people.
want to say? I feel like you really want to say something.
I feel like, man, there have been instances where just like cops get off on shooting people sometimes, and that's the most potentially offensive way to say it. And because they yield a certain amount of power, that's just
I feel
undeniable.
I feel like you've done a great job of introducing the topic that lets us know, right, that this isn't just a black thing, right, or a so-called black thing. And I think that that's important, right, because even the conversations that we have where we talk about, not alienate our viewers, right, or
Right.
even me, because I'm going to let you guys in on something. Me personally, I feel like, I get exhausted talking about race stuff because
We both do.
because for me, well, let me say specifically then, from a place of where I feel like exhausted, where I'm like, it's less about the violence and it's less about any of that, and it's more about that I feel like the more that people place people in those labels, that they're being agents of racism. That's where my exhaustion comes from, me specifically. And so I think that this is a great topic to introduce,
Yeah.
because, right?
And that's why we wanted to
sometimes-
start here. That's why we wanted to start here with the fact that the problem is systemic and it's not just a racial problem.
Also,
Because white people are dying too.
we're from the States.
Yeah.
And so that means that we know that there's going to be a high possibility, right, that there's going to be more so-called white folks who are viewing this,
Yeah.
than people who, don't have that mandate, right?
Right.
So it's important that we tell you that we know that this is happening to folks who
And
are so-called white folks also.
And there is a pushback when people go and get in an uproar because of like the whole Black Lives Matter movement. When people get in an uproar when it happens to a black person, but you have to consider, and the article really pointed this out really well. It's an amazing article. You have to consider the fact that the proportions.
Yeah, absolutely.
The proportions. There's just as many black people that die at the hands of as at the hands of police officers as white people, but there's 6 times as many white people as it is black people.
Only 18%.
Only, not even that, like 13. The number goes down.
6 to 1.
The number goes down all the time, so it's like 6 to 1. So that's why people get in an uproar about it, because it happens to white people too, and that's valid, and that's really valid, and that proves that the problem is not just racism, but it's a systemic power problem. It proves that, the fact that it also happens to a lot of white people, but doesn't mean that the problem's still not there's not a racial element there, because it happens. And it doesn't even have to do with neighborhoods either, because the article points out that the amount of killings that happen to unarmed citizens, the amount of crime in the area doesn't change the percentages. So it's not based on, like, it happens in certain areas more than it happens in other areas when it comes to, police killing unarmed people. It happens everywhere.
We're gonna make sure you guys can access that article anywhere that you guys can access the podcast.
Yep.
Just in case there be some individuals out there who feel like we maybe not representing their reality, or they have too much of an outside looking in.
Right.
A pig is a pig.
Right.
I'm gonna say that part. If you're not a crooked cop, great. I love you. Thanks for doing your job.
Yeah.
If you are not a crooked cop and you have crooked cops around you and you're not standing up to them, I'm going to say you can be doing better. And if you are a crooked cop, I have a big resounding fuck you very much going out to you. Shout out to you.
And so another pushback follow-up is that comes in these conversations is, what about black on black crime, right?
Hey, Black, I'm gonna tell you right now. When we did the meeting, I didn't even pay enough attention to this because I don't even like that question. But what angle are you asking that question from?
Because that's the angle of the pushback, right? It's like, oh yeah, like
And
you get mad.
Who does that pushback come from?
Lots of people, all types of people. I mean, it doesn't just
Like
come.
some example.
It comes from. I mean, I don't want to generalize. I don't want to take a generalization
Nah,
and
cool,
then
it's cool. Your experience.
turn around
in
and make a
your
generalize.
experience, you see the pushback coming from where?
I see the pushback coming from privileged individuals,
Okay.
and I say that, and I don't mean that racially at all.
Okay.
I just mean privileged in general,
Right.
Because I've heard privileged black people say it too.
Okay.
So
they say, what about black on black crime?
but that's the
Black on
thing,
black
like
crime.
violence is a United States of America thing. It's not a black thing. It's not a white thing. Like
Hello.
America, the states have been violent as long as there's been violence. You know, like violence begets violence. It was created in violence.
I'm just gonna say this.
It was born out of violence.
The part for me about black on black crime is like the less breath that I give it, I feel like usually the better off that I'm doing because I understand smoke and mirrors and things like that. I feel like it's like, yo, most violent crime in the States. Now people can trip out about police and all the rest of that, but most violent crime in the States is domestic violence and crimes of passion. If you're gonna get murked in the States, you are most likely to get. You're going to be taking a dirt nap because of somebody who knew you very well, right? Or somebody who's a part of your own community. And because we know that the States is, segmented off into these communities, when people say stuff like, what about black on black crime? I usually want to say to them, you're kidding me, right? Like, you really want me to speak? You must not know about how violent crime works in the States in general. And if you don't, that's great because I come from a violent background and a violent life and all the rest of that. So it makes sense that I would know more about those things, right, than another person. Right. So I don't trip. And then there's also that point to where it's like, no, this information is very accessible to you. It's very accessible. I
wanna point out a poll that was in the article. There was a YouGov poll last year that found, because this is very important, and I think this is why I wanted to have this discussion. A YouGov poll last year found that black people were worried about being a victim of police violence more than being a victim of a violent crime.
Okay.
So I brought that up because I want to speak to the mindset that police brutality leads to.
All right.
Because of police brutality, you grow up believing that those who are meant to protect you are more dangerous than those that actually want to do you harm.
I got to ask this point. How is it that there's still a narrative about these people being meant to protect you that people even still talk about? Because that's what I want to know.
Because that's their whole protect and serve, man, and like it's on the seal. Like that's the whole point of the conversation, right? Like that's the whole point of the entity. Like, okay, so let's talk about history, right? Where it was created, overseer, officer. Like police officers were created in order
slave catchers
to catch enslaved people, enslaved human beings that had been enslaved. Yeah. The police community was created just to catch them and to return them to slavery. So, I mean, it was born, again, out of violence and racism. So, but it goes back to that mentality that the average 80 Afro-European diasporic individual, the average 80 feels that they're more likely to be harmed by someone that their job now is to protect them versus someone who's actually, a criminal.
You know what? I think so you got to remember I'm a little bit broken, right? And this is what I tell myself. That's me telling myself that. I'm a little bit broken, come from, certain type of roughness and all the rest of that. So there's going to be a certain lack of being able to relate to a narrative of people who, didn't have to go through what I went through or whatever, right? And some of it I put myself through, so I didn't have to go through all of it. Some of it I definitely didn't choose. So when I say to myself, I say, sir, you as a broken person, you got to be careful, and it's also okay for you to have this curiosity. The curiosity that I have is the narrative about the protecting and serving. I'm like, a lie is a lie is a lie, right? So whether it's on a seal or not, like I think that there's that part where it's like, let's look. being angry, being sad, all of that stuff, that's all cool. When you let it throw you off your square, that's when it's not cool, right? And so for me, I'm just sort of like, come on now, like, wake up. There's all types of ripoffs that get presented to you as something else. And in the end, a ripoff is still a ripoff, you know? So it's like, if a con man is going to con you one way, yeah, why get more PO'd? Now, I know the answer to the question, but I think it's a question that people would do well to ask themselves.
So why do you think is the overarching purpose of the police force? I would go.
They are the enforcement arm of the judiciary.
I was just about to say, I feel like they protect capitalism.
They are the enforcement arm of the judiciary, and the judiciary is there, right? The capitalism and the judiciary, they are sitting at the table together.
Yeah, I would feel like they
sitting
are
at the table together.
Yeah.
You know, one person is, eating steak and potatoes. We talked about that in the Lost episode too, right? And the other person is, eating pasta. That's what they do. Judiciary sits with capitalism, and they break bread, right? And the cops are the bodyguards outside. Yeah. We're looking for a Sparks Steakhouse event, though. Shout out to you who know your history. What's the next?
Let us know. Let us know what you think. What your ideas are about this thing. Like, how do you feel? Do you think the problem with police brutality is a systemic problem, or do you think like it's a racial problem? Let us know. PassTheBagPodcast@gmail.com, at PassTheBagPodcast on IG.
We see you.
Holla at us. Let us know.